or the other side, that you really steered away from making this an argument about why conservatives are wrong, or why they're evil, or why they're short-sighted, or why they're cruel and harsh, and that sort of thing. Is that part? Do you think that kind of by taking the upper road, a high road, you can more likely get to compromise?
It's a very good question. First, the situation that I am in, I'm an executive, much different than a legislative position. Legislators need to pass legislation, but I am held primarily responsible to get things done. If you are poking your finger in the eye of the other side and calling them dirty names, that does not facilitate good legislative relations. So I have kept and worked very hard at relations on both sides, right? LBJ, it's about the personal still at the end of the day. That's part of it.
So you reach out to them?
All the time, all the time. It is remember I spent 8 years in Clinton administration. It is about the personal relationship. And part of being the craft of being a politician and an effective leader are the personal relationships and the ability to work with people, and that's carrot and sticks, and that's charm and charisma and warmth and a kick in the can once in a while. So that's part of it. And there's enough necessary negative. Unnecessary negative I stay away from. Also, David, I don't believe that's our problem. Mm-hmm. I was trained as a lawyer, an appellate lawyer. Argue the point that vindicates your case. You could argue the conservatives are wrong in their vision of society as an exclusive individual-based society. That's not why we're losing. I don't think people are going to accept their view. I think we have to fix our vulnerability, which is proving that government can actually work. Mm-hmm. I think the conservatives' best argument is impossibility.
Right.
He says he's going to use government to do all these things. When was the last time you ever saw government do anything well? Reminds me of the old joke, I'm from the government, I'm here to help. Right? They win on that argument.
Right.
Take that argument away from them.
Where does innovation in government fit into your sense of how to proceed? There are many who argue now in education reform that the forces of the status quo are the teachers' unions, and you yourself have now become, you put yourself pretty firmly on the side of charter schools and that sort of thing. So where does that, how does that fit into the overall argument? How do you get to a place where government works more effectively?
That's why I think this is going to be interesting and what they bring to the table. I think technology is going to be an interesting way, in some ways, to sidestep the conundrum that we now have. The conundrum I face is change is hard, and you have established a whole bureaucracy around these programs, and you go to change these programs, you run right into the face of that bureaucracy. And that bureaucracy is now unionized, and they have work rules, and they have people in and you go to make a change. You run into that bureaucracy, and that bureaucracy is normally a supporter of the Democratic Party. So it is very, very hard for any Democrat to do it, or for me, I have a Democratic Assembly, to get them to do it. I think technology, innovation, is actually going to be a facilitator of that, because you can just come up with a better way of doing things. They're working on technology in classrooms that is just, I believe, going to revolutionize education.
It's also true that the charter schools, they have longer work days. They keep children in school longer during the year. They have individuals who really work with the children themselves, and they're available 24/7 to the kids, to their families. They enlist the parents. There are a whole lot of other things that they do that go beyond technology itself that are frowned upon by the teachers unions. We have Teach for America. Draws a lot of students out of Harvard and places like this, and yet there's a lot of opposition in the teachers union. No, we don't want those young bright kids coming in here. We don't want them to be teachers.
Teachers union. I've had significant issues with from day one? Well, I'll tell you, day one, I was the Attorney General, I was running for governor. I went to the teachers union, I said, I'm not going to ask for your support. Because I'm going to propose changes that I know that you won't like. Now, the teachers union is the strongest single political force in the state of New York. Democrats and Republicans, by the way. They are just the most donations, the most organization, etc. But I believe they're going to have to make changes that their members are going to find disruptive. I want evaluations, which right now don't happen. In some schools, you need longer days, etc. The kinds of things you're doing in charter schools, that's very disruptive for the membership. So the union opposes it. I support charter schools, and unabashedly. Mm-hmm. And the union opposes charter schools, which I just don't understand. Charter schools I see as laboratories of invention. If there's something good to learn, why not do it? They're not of a size that's going to threaten mainstream public education. Maybe 3-4% of the schools are charter schools. Use them as laboratories. But the bureaucracies oppose change.
And how do you, as a leader then, political leader, as a Democrat, as a progressive, bring them around?
Well, sometimes you bring them around. Sometimes you have to confront them. And then it becomes a showdown. So if you're unwilling, first of all, if you're unwilling to fight for change, don't be an executive in government, period. And that sounds sort of trite, but some people don't have the personality to be an executive in government. If you want to be widely liked and avoid confrontation, which most people want in life, don't be an executive. Be a legislator. I have had ongoing battles with the teachers union every year, every budget cycle. I know them, I grew up with them, I've done a lot with them, but we have a difference of opinion. Mm-hmm. And we have had legislative battles almost every year.
Mm-hmm. Let me switch subjects. It's related, but as you think about closing the inequality gap, which is growing, the place of Wall Street has now become very, very controversial. The financial community is a driving force in the city of New York, and yet it's also now become a whipping boy for a lot of people on the progressive side. How do you think about that? How do you think about economic growth, how we lift all boats, and the fairness questions of what's going on right now with the financial community? Yeah,
I think two things, David. First, I think part of the resentment towards Wall Street is a hangover from what happened 2007, 2008. 2007, 2008, we hit the recession. It was a housing-based recession. People's housing values go down. Some values are still not where they were in 2007 in New York. The value of your house is not just the value of your house. That is your largest single asset. That's your retirement fund. That's how you're going to pay your daughter's wedding. That's your first small business loan. That's everything, the equity in your house. And the deal was you buy a house and it goes up in value and then you retire when you sell it. You have people who are still underwater. And many people who are still not at the 2007 value. Somebody stole that value from them. That's their feeling. Mm-hmm. Who stole it? The bankers stole it. On their scam of these mortgage-backed securities that they sold like hamburgers. And you know what? We bailed out the bankers. They got billions. Nobody bailed out the homeowner. And the bankers went right on to the next scam, and they got basic immunity for this terrible, terrible crime against the people of the country of New York. I think that's where the anger starts.
How much of that argument do you think is true?
As a matter of perception, it's largely true. Because their reality is so clear. My house still isn't worth what it was in 2007. And that's everything to me. And I pick up a paper and I read record profits again for these bankers. they're right back to $30 billion, $40 billion package, $1 million packages. So I think that's where it starts. But I don't fault Wall Street. I fault the regulators. You know that if you leave a market unrestricted, it will run up as much as it can. They're entrepreneurs. They never said they're anything else. They're capitalists. Make as much money as they can as fast as they can. If they can come up with a new mortgage product and get somebody to buy it, they will. Well, it's not, it doesn't have the highest integrity. Who cares? If I can sell it today, I will sell it today. Government was supposed to be the regulator of that financial economy that we know can spin itself out of control. And it has many times. And the government fell down. And the government fell down in following up the cases to the extent anyone did. So I don't have a problem confronting that directly. Yes, it's a financial engine, but it's an engine that requires a governor. Because that engine, without a governor, not governor like me, governor on an engine, different governor, will over-rev and will explode itself, which it did with the mortgage fraud. And I don't have a problem with that at all.
So you think rather than taking a punitive attitude toward Wall Street, it ought to be, we need much more sensible regulation, tougher regulation, and more accountable, a more accountable system?
Yes. Somebody should have stepped in and said, these mortgage-backed securities you're selling are garbage wrapped in a ribbon. Mm-hmm. And you're just transferring those parcels. At one point, someone is going to look at the underlying collateral, and then the whole scheme is going to fall like a house of cards, which it did.
Right. Let me ask you one last question and then open this up. But I want to come back to the Paris question and the migrant issue, which is now flaring up as a serious issue. Your take on this, you're under enormous cross pressure as governor to take a stand about the migrants and what kind of, well, are we going to continue to have, are we going to have an open door, welcome in as the president wants, 10,000, more than 10,000, or are we going to listen to those voices now that are rising to say, no, it's too dangerous?
I think it's a balance. I think many forces are now trying to politicize this. This is an election season, so it's the silly season is started. And the governors who say, I will refuse to let the refugees in. How? How? Where does it say in the state constitution you can refuse a person placed by the federal government? What are you going to have your militia fight the federal government at the borders of your state? It's a pure political statement. It's up to the federal government. If the federal government lets refugees in and places them in your state, the governor has no authority to turn them down. Having said that, the question is a bona fide question. We have to protect Americans and not lose our soul as America in the process, right? When the day America says, close the gates, build the wall, then I say, take down the Statue of Liberty because you've gone to a different place. And read Emma Lazarus and the poem on the Statue of Liberty. Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to be free. Once you say we're out of business, that's no longer true. So I won't let them win by conceding defeat of the American dream. At the same time, this federal government has to make sure it's doing the screening and the people who are coming in are safe. And the federal government has to say we are capable of doing that. And if the federal government is not capable of doing that, David, then they should say that too. You know, if they really can't screen, the answer is we can't screen. But their position is we can screen effectively, and if that's the case, do the screening, make sure it's right, do it exhaustively, but don't give up your soul as American.
Do you think, do you have some fear that the question of the Syrian refugees is going to become conflated with the question of the immigrants who are already here, the Latin immigrants who are here, the 11 or 12 million, this is all going to get roiled together, and there's going to be a big pushback against all of it.
Yeah, I think in about 27 minutes, because the next time you have Donald Trump on the podium, he's just going to rattle off Syrian refugees in the whole line of, he's going to have them with the Mexicans, in this afternoon probably. And it will just blend into the larger question of, we have economic problems, they're stealing our jobs, they're too expensive, it's these illegal immigrants that are coming in, we can't pay for the healthcare, can't pay for the education, they're stealing the bottom end jobs, kick them out, and the Syrian refugees are part of that.
It's a witch's brew, isn't it?
It is.
Let's open this up to your thoughts, comments, questions.
Hi, I wanted to start by thanking you. I spoke to some transgender activists in New York and asked what I should ask you today. And they said to say thank you for your recent executive actions to include gender identity and non-discrimination. My question is, why did you choose now to act, and why did you choose to use executive action? The process has seemed stalled in the legislature for years, and despite New York being as a progressive center of the movement, so I'm curious why you chose this path and why now.
Yeah, it's a good question. It gets back to David's point about needing to work with the legislature. Gridlock is death for all, I believe, okay? Gridlock is especially damaging for progressives, more than conservatives. In an odd way, gridlock achieves the conservative goal. Government can't function. Yay! We won. We stopped the evil machine. So they go home and they celebrate gridlock. For those of us who believe in the functioning of government, we have a funeral because of gridlock, right? Because we believe the government could have done good things. And gridlock stopped the machine, and we believed in the product of the machine. So I worked very hard at legislative relations, and I've been highly successful with a Republican Senate. As I said before, marriage equality, which gun control, I passed in the state of New York.
You got those with Republican votes.
With Republicans. So I've been very good with legislative support. There are some issues that the legislature will not pass politically. And then it becomes a question of, do I use my executive power to accomplish something the legislature doesn't want to accomplish? This is now a very subtle, nuanced decision. You do it too often, you're seen as running around the legislature, and the legislature gets annoyed. And you lose the goodwill with the legislature. If you don't do it on the important issues, you don't get the important issues done. We passed marriage equality. There was a second bill that outlawed discrimination against transgender people. That bill was proposed for something like 6 years. And it was not passed for 6 years. And every year for 6 years, everybody said, I think this year is the year that we're going to get it passed, and we're going to work, and we're going to lobby, and it didn't pass. I said, look, at one point, you sort of get the hint, and I'm a little tone deaf, but I'm not that tone deaf. 6 years, you're not going to pass it. I believe you're not going to pass it. And I did, by executive action, I construed the existing law, the existing anti-discrimination law, to include transgender in the definition of sexual identity. And I did that by executive order. Some legislators said, you circumvented the legislature. I said, oh, I'm sorry. Did you want to do it? Because if you want to do it, I'll pass the law and I'll pull back the executive order. But I think it was clear that the legislature was never going to do that politically. The Senate, which is controlled by Republicans, and it was too important for me not to do. I also did the same thing with minimum wage. Minimum wage, I wanted a large increase. They wouldn't give me a large increase. I took some increase, and then had a vehicle called a wage board that can look industry by industry and determined to raise the wage for fast food workers to $15 in New York State. And now I'm proposing a law to bring all workers to $15 after having done the fast food workers, and now we're mobilizing a whole populist effort.
And what's the outlook?
I think good. I think good. The Republican Senate is against it, but it is overwhelmingly popular, and we have a lot of momentum and a lot more momentum. And I'm excited because it would be a trendsetter. It would be the highest wage in the nation. And you know, New York, if you can do it here, you can do it anywhere. So you'd be surprised when New York does something, it becomes a legitimate question for every other politician in every other state. And then a microphone goes to every other governor, well, why don't you propose $15? And that's a very powerful impact when you can change policy not just in your state, but provoke it nationwide. And I think we have a very good shot.
What I want to suggest is not only ask for your questions, but if you've got thoughts, comments about the direction of things, this is intended to be an exchange in which he has a chance to hear your views as well. Lee.
Hi. First of all, I'm a Rockland County native, so thank you for your service to our and I also want to especially thank you for your advocacy for the students of East Ramapo and their right to an equal education. My question to you actually is about how we make the argument, which I think you made quite convincingly, that government actually works. I agree with you, this is really critical, but I think there's another piece in there, which is people feeling that the system isn't rigged against them and that they have trust in the institutions. So I want to ask you about New York, our state. Politico this year recently called us. They said that there's not just a culture of corruption in New York as much as there's a festival of sorts. We've seen countless leaders over the past years indicted and convicted. We've 5 in a row now of our last state leaders of the state senate have been indicted on corruption charges. So my question for you is, for us as like the next generation of leaders here, how do we fix this perception problem, warranted or not, that the system is rigged, and what can we do to change that equation?
Yeah, it's a good question. And it's actually not just now. David mentioned Lincoln. Lincoln movie, when Lincoln needs to wrangle votes out of the legislature, and they're talking about or alluding to having to pay off legislators or threaten legislators, or he needs someone to really manipulate the legislature. They say, get the boys from New York down to do it. You know? So, this has been a long-term problem, predominantly in the legislature. We have had some governors who have had some creative issues, but they were different kind of issues, legal issues. I think at one point you will elect different types of people to the legislature. It's amazing how few people run for the state legislature and how often the state incumbents just get reelected. And I think it doesn't really change until you change the people who are there. We passed all sorts of laws. We passed more disclosure and transparency laws than have ever been passed before. One of the cases brought against the legislative leaders is brought because of the law that I passed that required more disclosure. He disclosed something, and that's now the issue. But I don't think it really changes until you elect different people. But I don't think that's the essence of what they're talking about. I think when they say I don't trust the government, it's not just that I don't trust the individuals because they're going to be petty and they don't trust the whole enterprise. It doesn't work. It's not efficient. It doesn't represent me. It's all gridlocked. It's all political. It's controlled by the special interest corporations. And it is just not a vehicle that I see as capable of doing anything for me. And we're trying to attack that on every level. The physical with the Tappan Zee and the airports. The current minority community says, we believe we are disenfranchised from the police community. And that when police commit crimes, the DAs who are supposed to prosecute have a conflict of interest because the DA supervises that police force, works with that police force. We believe that's a conflict of interest. There are a Garner case in Staten Island, Missouri, all across the country. Government, what are you going to do? No response. One state says, I agree. And we will appoint a special prosecutor who has no connection with the police if there is ever a case where a policeman is accused of killing someone who is unarmed, or if there's a question as to whether or not the person is unarmed. We'll bring in a special prosecutor so the DA who is associated with that police force doesn't try the case. State of New York. I appointed the Attorney General. Any case that raises that issue, the Attorney General is going to handle that issue. So I think you have to make government work. You have to make it current. You have to make it responsive to the needs of the time. And you're not going to do that with this. You're not going to talk because they've heard the talk, they've heard the speeches. It's the show me phase. Demonstrate it. You're not going to fix this relationship by saying, I'm really, really going to try. I understand. I'm going to try harder this time, and I'm going to be a better person. No. I've heard that enough times. I want you to demonstrate the change, and not until you demonstrate the change will I really accept it. So I don't talk about building trust in government. This is the first time I've ever talked about it. I talk about the first point, making government work to help people. I've never talked about building trust as a political philosophy to actually empower progressive politics and government. I think you have to show that, which is what we're trying to do. Tappan Zee Bridge, by the way, Rockland, after 20 years, I announced we were going to build the Tappan Zee Bridge. In 1 year from the date of announcement, we broke ground on the Tappan Zee Bridge. 1 year. LaGuardia Airport, we are going to rebuild that airport. If I have to go out there with a shovel and hammer and nails, we are going to rebuild that airport. And don't underestimate, by the way, how hard it is to get the bureaucracy to actually perform. It is a daily beast. I sit there on a project like LaGuardia or Tappan Zee. I meet once a week. I make them all come in. How much road did we lay down? How come we only did 10 feet? Who's driving the steamroller? If you don't go faster, I'll drive the steamroller.
Governor, thank you very much for joining us today. My name is John Baptiste. I am a second year here at the Kennedy School and a very, very, very proud Brooklynite. In fact, I'm still paying taxes there. Thank you so much.
I reduced them, though. A little bit. But at least it turned the arrow in the right direction.
Since you've been kind enough to ask for thoughts, I'm going to share a couple of my own concerns. There's something that's pretty fresh in my mind, particularly as you mentioned police brutality, and also yesterday, as it happened, we had a visit from former Mayor Giuliani, who spoke about CompStat and the stop and frisk policy. I'm curious, in your role as a lawyer, your thoughts about the lack of, what I perceive to be a lack of transparency as far as police misconduct on the streets of New York City. In my opinion, it shouldn't have to get so far as someone dying or someone being killed before an independent prosecutor is able to step in. I have bear with me because my thoughts are still sort of coalescing. But I am concerned as far as what I believe to be the really just frightening amount of power that specifically the police union has in preventing any sort of opening up of the police culture in New York City. I wonder if you could speak a little bit about that and the implications.
This question, the hard questions in politics, especially at this time, when it's emotion. This is an emotional topic. Maybe not from you, but it is an emotional topic. And emotion, again, stops logic. This is like the Syria question. Well, we're America, let everybody in. Yeah, but if you let in a terrorist, we all have a problem. Well, you have to do both. You have to police, screen refugees, but don't lose the essence of who we are. We have a problem with the minority community police relationship and with the police feelings in general. My appointment of a special prosecutor, as I said, was the first state in the nation, was not pleasing to the police unions because they believed the DA who they work with was in the best position to judge them. And my bringing in a totally independent person who didn't understand the context, they thought this was actually unfair. I believed it was justified to bring confidence to the minority community, and I thought if I brought confidence, it would start to calm the waters. I don't know that there is a disclosure, transparency problem on misconduct, because I just don't know. I don't know what FOIL laws apply to police records, etc. I do know we also have an issue on the other side, where police officers could get to a point where they say, you know what, I'm not going to take these kinds of risks, and I'm not going to put myself in these situations, because everything I do, I'm getting second-guessed. So I'm going to stay in the car. You know, I remember a time I built housing out in Brooklyn, 7-5 precinct, East New York. At that time, there were more murders in the 7-5 precinct in East New York, Bedford-Stuyvesant, than the entire city of Boston. You would call the police, they wouldn't come. They would come, they would stay in the car because it was just too dangerous, literally, to get out. You know, at one point, police officers can say, if I go out there and I try to do my job, I could be subject to such criticism and second guessing that I don't want to do it. So it's both sides of the equation. I feel good what we did in New York with the special prosecutor, which again is a step nobody has taken, and fundamentally goes right at the Eric Garner issue. I don't know that disclosure is a problem, but I do want us all to be sensitive to there are two sides to this discussion. There really are.
Yeah, Ray Kelly, the former police commissioner in New York, was here 10 days ago, 2 weeks ago, and he argued that he thought that police already were staying in their cars now, and that's one of the reasons that the crime rates are going back up again. But he also favored putting cameras on every policeman. He thought there should be far more transparency and there ought to be body cameras so that people had a way to see what had actually happened.
Which I support. And that is ultimate transparency. That's why I said, you guys with technology, you can accomplish things that sidestep all these normal obstacles and arguments. Cameras on a policeman. Forget the Freedom of Information law and what documents you can get. We can videotape everything, which is how we saw Eric Garner. Put the cameras on the policeman. We'll see exactly what happened.
Respectfully, I do not think that is enough, because if, as I'm implying, if information is not freely accessible, then I'm not even sure that having additional information in the form of video footage of police misconduct will result in a change in the incentives for bad behavior. If I'm not sure if I'm being entirely clear. additional information that you would get from the videos might not result in police officers who would otherwise, I don't know, arrest without cause, harass community members. If there's not going to be a necessary repercussion for that behavior, then I'm not sure the additional information is going to do any good, particularly if it's not widely available. The information that we have already is not. That's my issue.
I hear you. I don't know the availability of the cameras, but look, I saw on the news the other day, a police officer somewhere in the Midwest, I think, pulled a girl out of a chair.
Yeah, South Carolina.
And it went viral. It was all over the place. There are very few secrets. And if something serious happens, that police officer can be brought up on charges. And that is the ultimate sanction, especially with a special prosecutor. You grab someone, throw them to the floor without the proper basis, you lose your job. You could be guilty of a crime. So it's hard to get around the videotape.
Ideally, yes. But I was reading about a case yesterday, and this is the last comment I make. I know that some of you are waiting to ask questions. I apologize. I was reading about a case yesterday where a lady was pulled over, was driving in her car with her daughter, stopped the car because she saw several officers surrounding a young person, and thought that there was like a serious amount of aggression in the situation. Started to tape it. The officer, I believe, slammed her against the car, arrested her, and she blacked out, came to a short while later, but was given a form to essentially sign away her ability to sue the city of New York for the encounter, in exchange for which her record would be expunged. I suppose with that kind of incentive, the choice between do I not sign the waiver, do I go to court, and then this woman in that case did. The jury did not find in her favor, although there were some issues with the jury selection there as well on behalf of the defense for the officer. With that kind of incentive to, you know what, I can't afford the time to go through all of this, I can just sign away the ability to sue the state of New York or pursue this further. With the disappearance of these incidents in that form, that is part of my concern.
I hear you, and it's a good concern. But look, what'll happen in that case is there will be, once that police officer has a camera, there will be 45 news agencies demanding to see the camera, demanding to see the film. They will get the film because the police department can't say, no, I'm not going to give you the camera. And then it'll be all over the internet, and it'll be what it'll be. There's something just, the ultimate transparency, show me the tape of what happened.
Let's go back here. Yes, please.
So continuing the trend of many of our question askers, I'm also a native New Yorker from Westchester, and also would like to thank you for your service to our state. And I think the thesis that you've articulated about what it takes to make a vision of effective government more tangible and more accessible really resonates with me, and I can imagine with a lot of the students here at the Kennedy School who share that vision. And I think there were a lot of sort of implicit things that you talked about what are the barriers to that currently happening in terms of the bureaucratic barriers, the need for technological innovation. But I'd love to hear your sense of sort of from the front lines, from various positions and vantage point in state government, what are the biggest barriers and what is the relative balance, for example, of knowing what works but having it stymied by bureaucratic culture change versus still needing to innovate and test things and identify what process and sort of capacity innovations might be required, and how should we as a generation of people who aspire to be a part of creating effective government think about allocating our efforts across those kinds of initiatives?
You have two main obstacles from my position. Again, big difference between executive and legislative. I want to be in government. I say to people, do you want to be an executive or do you want to be the legislative? I'll be either. No. They are very different skill sets and very different lifestyles. It's one or the other. As an executive, the daily beasts are fighting the bureaucracy, which is your own bureaucracy, your own backyard, your own machine, and trying to get your own machine to work. The second is political gridlock, and gridlock happens because politicians want to be self-serving and talk to their own constituents, and they would rather be purists to their own constituents than statesmen and compromise and actually get something done. Because if you compromise, the purists, the extremists say, well, you should have held out. How could you ever agree to a minimum wage that was only $9? You were supposed to ask for 12. I did ask for 12. The Republican Senate said they wouldn't do 12. They would only do 9, which is $1 more than it is now. You should have held out for 12. But then I wouldn't have gotten 9. You sold out. You should have held out for 12. The politically easy position is hold out for 12. Nobody gets anything. The minimum wage doesn't get up. But that politician gets to go home and says, I held up for 12. That governor, he wanted a compromise. He would have taken 9. Not me. I'm a true progressive. I held out for 12. Oh, that's great. You beat your chest. You gave a great little speech. And by the way, the person who was making 8, who could have made 9, is still making 8. And that dollar would have been everything to them. But God bless you. I hope you sleep well tonight because you gave your political speech to you and yourself. That is gridlock and the bureaucracy. The hope with you is body camera. Technology can bypass the bureaucracy because the machine we built is a dated, stifling machine. David's point about the teachers union. We built this array of complicated programs that then develop their own infrastructure and interest groups that make political contributions and are very, very powerful. And when you go to change one of your own programs because you want to fix it, because you're actually there to get a better product, a better goal, your own machine resists you. I was watching some crazy science fiction movie the other night. I couldn't sleep. And this person designs a computer, and then the computer becomes smarter than the person. And he's trying to tell the computer to do something, and it's telling him, I'm overriding you, and I'm doing... That's what we created. We created a government machine that we say we want to make a change in how we educate students. We want to make a change in how we build roads. We want to make a change in how we forecast emergencies. And the bureaucracy says, no, we like it the way it is. And you say, yeah, but you're my machine. I built you, and I operate you. And the machine says, not anymore, you don't. I hope technology can come in over that. And technology can almost say, forget the machine. Forget the machine. You know how we're going to do education now? Every kid gets a computer. That computer has a piece of software that adjusted that child and how that child learns. And that technology is going to fundamentally change the dynamic of the classroom. Forget how we do emergency broadcasting in the past. Everybody's phone now is going to have an emergency locator, an emergency system, and when there's an emergency, it's going to go off on their phone. I don't care about the old machine. I think there's going to be more and more of that. Because otherwise, changing the machine and battling the gridlock on both sides. Republicans don't want to do certain things because it hurts them with their base. Democrats don't want to do certain things because they want to be a hero with their base. Democrats don't want to tinker with the machine. Republicans don't want to go near social issues that I would call progressive, transgender, anti-discrimination. That's gridlock. And then you have to battle with the machine in your own backyard. Otherwise, it's a great job.
Please.
I'm Noah. I'm not from New York. I'm from a different blue state, California.
Okay, who else has a question then?
I think in this room and probably in the state of New York, your message is compelling. But when I fly to Thanksgiving next week, I'm going to fly over a whole bunch of states that tend to disagree with you. And the numbers show us that in Congress and in the governorship and the state houses, that message is not really winning. And it's actually this individualist government doesn't work message that's actually winning the debate. And you know, I think you talked about all these movements of the women's movement that started in New York and civil rights that started in New York, and the government will work movement doesn't sound like it's the battle cry that's going to change that political dynamic. So what's the strategy that you see out of New York and out of California where conservative is actually left of the rest of middle America? What's the strategy for middle America that will change the tide? Because Obama did it for a second and then everything fell apart. So I'm curious, how do you take this to the rest of the country?
Look, the government, you do not win until you get past the government doesn't work point. And that is deeply embedded, and that is experiential for people. It's not even a political argument anymore. They have their own opinion because they have their own experiences. They paid their taxes, and they filled out that form, and they know what they think of the person who wrote that form. They went to the Department of Motor Vehicles, and they waited on that line, and they spoke to that clerk, and they know what they think of that clerk in that process. So it's not just a political argument. You have to defeat that with reality. It's not perception. And by the way, there's an honesty to it. Because if the government doesn't work, then there is no debate. Then the conservatives are right. There is no option. Your whole vision of cooperative collective society doesn't work. So you have to prove that government works, but you actually have to prove it. Now, it has been proven at times. FDR proved government worked. Very practical. He didn't go to change the world, but he said we're going to have people go and cut down trees, and the people went and cut down trees, and we're going to have people go and build roads, and people built roads, and the economy came back. It worked. Bill Clinton, government worked. You could fly over those states, yell down. You think government's working? Yeah, 22 million new jobs, unemployment down, my house value went up. Yeah, it's working. So there have been periods where it has worked. It's not a foreign concept. But you have to establish government as a productive vehicle. I've been doing it for 5 years. I'm not in a position to stand up and say, okay, to all you doubting Thomases, come to look to New York State. I'm not there yet. I have to get the Tappan Zee to actually hit land on the other side. And it has to do that before it falls, right? So, and it's not done overnight. But I believe that that is a condition precedent to this argument.
My only pushback would be unemployment's at 5%, 10 plus million more people have health care. It feels like government's actually working, and the numbers say we're in better state today than we were 8 years ago, and still the message is failing. So I'm just confused as someone who would like to push these policies.
Oh, really? Government is working? Then how come we still have homeless people on the streets? And how come we have more homeless people on the streets? How come Congress can't pass a budget, and there's no budget, and all I get from Congress is two sides, both saying the other side stinks, where incompetence is not an impression, it's an admission. They both agree that it's incompetent. You still can't come up with a gun legislation that makes any sense to anyone. How can you say that it works? Obamacare was passed. The Republicans fight every day to try to unravel it. And who knows, maybe they'll be successful. Where did you see government works? Maybe if you're an accountant and you look at the 5.3, but it doesn't feel like people are working. And why? Because more people got jobs in McDonald's? You consider that an economic success, and that's government working? Terrorists coming in everywhere, Paris, government is working? I don't see it. That's the pushback to your pushback.
Please.
Hi, thank you. So, two quick questions. One, how do you think we can get more women and people of color into elected office in the state? And second, you seem like an optimist, and I'm an optimist, and I'm scared of losing that as I get older. So how do you retain your optimism for the future of progressive movements in this country?
Drugs, I believe, help. Sometimes large quantities of alcohol. But first, you have to be an optimist. You know, it's almost a statement of life nowadays, but certainly in this business, because there are several steps to winning this overall battle, and they're hard steps, and I get that because I've been doing it for a long, long time. So, yes, I'm an optimist, but ultimately I believe, fundamentally, that the American people will respond to their better angels. I just think they haven't had a chance. I think they don't like being mean, and they don't like being exclusive. And it's un-American to be unfair. And it's un-American to discriminate. It really is. And it's un-American not to be compassionate. We are a compassionate people. You know how you see it? Whenever this garbage of government and politics is out of the way, whenever there's an emergency, natural disasters. By the way, anyone who says there's no climate change, I've been governor for 5 years. I have had in 5 years 9 federally declared weather emergencies, okay? Floods, hurricanes, tornadoes. By the way, we don't have floods, hurricanes, and tornadoes in the state of New York. 7 feet of snow in Buffalo. Buffalo's accustomed to snow. Never before 7 feet of snow. I've had 9 in 5 years. My father was governor for 12 years, had 11. So the frequency is way up. But in these emergencies, the generosity and the compassion of people is just amazing. People show up from everywhere. I'll be in an emergency down on Long Island. People get in the car, drive down from upstate. They have cookies, they have blankets, they have shovels. And I say, what are you doing here? And they say, well, we just saw this on the news. We came to help. I mean, that's, you know, people get we're all here together. They get community, right? We're basically a religious nation. Every religion says the same thing. Judaism, Christianity, Islam, it all says we're a community. And you support and you love. Tikkun olam. Reach out, heal the divide, right? In Judaism. So that's who we are. You just have to touch that and give that a vehicle. That vehicle is government. It is the cooperative entity to accomplish societal goals.
What's your time frame?
I could stay here all day, but you can't.
No, we'll take a couple more. We'll go another 5 to 10 minutes. Go ahead, please.
Hi, I'm Laura Metcalf, and I help lead a nonprofit here in Boston called Social Finance. And first, I want to commend Governor Cuomo and thank him because the state of New York, along with the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, has really been a leader in adopting a really innovative form of government financing called social impact bonds, or pay for success. Partially, that was developed here at the Kennedy School. So first, thank you for that. What really resonated with me is this making government work theme, and we get excited. We get to work with some of the most innovative people in government who are really trying to think about how do we get government to pay for outcomes rather than services, and make better use of taxpayer dollars. But even those really innovative people live within this bureaucracy of old government. And so I guess, first of all, I guess my question is, how have you created that culture where there are people in your administration who are willing to take these risks and do something? Because it's much easier and less risky, I think, to just stay with the status quo and do things the way they've always been done. So how are you creating that culture in such a large organization to really drive change?
You can change some people's orientation, but more you have to bring in new people. Because on a human level, a person has been there, average length of stay at HUD when I was there, 17 years. You have a 17-year employee. You're going to say to them, everything you've been doing for the past 17 years is nice, but it hasn't worked. So we're now going to change fundamentally the way we do business. You can't. You're asking them to reject everything, and they know security, and we know what we do. So you can try that. More, I think it's bringing in new people with new ideas. And when I say step over the machine, just come up with a different way to do it. The bureaucracy in the government is bad, but I have to tell you, the bureaucracy in the not-for-profits is only one step better. Because they sort of like to do it the way they do it. I want to go to a system in New York on homeless care where we basically say, I'm going to pay you $20,000 to help that person who's on the corner right now. And if you don't help that person, or you fail to help that person, our contract's over. It's difficult to get the not-for-profits to go there. They work the other way. They have 20 beds. They want to fill the 20 beds. If somebody doesn't live by the rules, they kick somebody out, they get somebody else. But now you have the same person who's on the street, just recirculating on the street. We want to get the person off the street. But it's changing the model that people are comfortable with and that works for them.
Have you found public-private partnerships that do work that you're happy with?
On the economic development side, we are doing great things. We focused, one of the places where government fails is fighting poverty, urban decay. Buffalo was New York's worst case city for urban decay. Urban decline for 40 years. Tim Russert, God bless his soul. I remember when we were 20-something years old, we went out, we did the tour of Buffalo, and it was already the third generation of decline. The steel mills closed. It could be Western Massachusetts, it could be the Midwest, any industrialized small city that lost its factory. We have turned Buffalo around, David. It is an amazing story of economic success. The oldest steel plant had closed, and it was a dinosaur of sort of what was. It was like the grave site of the old economy of Buffalo, and it just sat there. We just brought in the largest solar panel manufacturer in the hemisphere. That's going to build solar panels on that site. So, and that's been pure private. It's sort of empowerment zones under Clinton on steroids. We'll provide funding if the private business community comes together with an actual specific proposal to create jobs. And we're basically like an investment banker on the state side. If you have a job creation proposal, we'll invest, but it has to be a real specific transaction, not process. Buffalo's turned around, and the South Bronx, in terms of urban poverty, we cut the unemployment rate on young minority males in the Bronx in half in 4 years. In half. With a job voucher that goes to a private employer where we pay part of the salary and we also pay the training while the person's in that job. Unemployment has been cut in half.
That was a state, private, public-private. Was the city involved?
No, that was just state voucher to a private company that hired a minority youth.
Yeah. Let me ask you this one last question. Go ahead, please. Last question.
Recently on topic of legal migration, it somehow got conflated with illegal migration, and several studies have shown that legal migration benefits the economy and all that. So in terms of, from the perspective of showing that it works, somehow the perception has not changed that legal migration is good. So what do you see as the path forward on that, and what are your personal thoughts on that?
I think you're very right. Legal migration has been documented to have a positive effect on the economy. What they will say, because they don't want to lose, this is an emotional argument on immigration, right? It's not, nobody's talking facts here. They're just catering to the emotion. They'll say, yes, legal immigration is right. Get the illegals out, Donald Trump, deport the 11 illegals and have them come back legally. That's my point. That's his debate. We'll build the wall. They come to the wall. They have their legal card. They come in. That's Trump's argument, not my argument. Thank you guys for taking the time. David,
let me ask one last question. If these, well, this is important. As these folks graduate and they're thinking of going into government, and they have to make a choice between national government, state government, local government, how do they resolve that? What's your advice on how to think about that?
If it's your first government job, go federal. except my daughter, who has to stay in my state no matter what. I would say go federal if it was your first job, because I did it the other way around. I think when you're in the federal, David, you see you're at the top of the pyramid, and you just see how the Fed works with the state, works with the local, and how the marbles roll through the system. And I think that orientation is very helpful. I think second to that, the federal government is more removed, more abstract. The states are actually quicker and more creative laboratories of democracy. Hands-on is local government. And if you literally want to open a daycare center and you want to get it opened in the next 9 months, you want that kind of immediate goal gratification, that's local government. If you want to design a program where cities can open a daycare center in 9 months, that's state government. And if you want to see how to change the world, except it's not really going to happen in our lifetime, go to the federal government.
Okay, well, on behalf of our Senate, this was an event co-sponsored by the Center for Public Leadership and the Institute of Politics. We had undergraduates and graduate students here, but most of all, we had you here, and it was terrific. Thank you. Thanks so much. It was really good.